When I first learned that Pixar was making a sequel to Inside Out, I was quite interested. Some people out there assumed by default that the movie would be bad just because it is a sequel, and as you know, we are currently living in the sequel and remake apocalypse.
What did you think?
My dear fella, I never doubted you for a second.
The original movie had such a great world and tons of room to expand. The movie even teased some of the possibilities that a sequel could bring. Later down the line, it was revealed that there would be new emotions, and one of them would be anxiety. This reveal had me even more intrigued, and seemed to prove my point that there was room for interesting ideas in the sequel. So I stayed optimistic about the film up to its release. And then I went to see it in theaters. As much as I had just hoped the movie would be at least good, and not much more than that, considering Pixar's recent output has been pretty shoddy.
Huh. This is, what's happening here?
I did not expect to come out of that movie with tears in my eyes and holding the opinion that it is the best sequel Pixar has ever made. Yes, even better than Toy Story 2, a movie I have claimed in the past was a perfect sequel. In fact, this may even be the very best movie Pixar has ever made, period. Though it is a close call between this one and Monsters, Inc. for me. And to those who have seen my channel before, you may know that I made a 45-minute video explaining why Monsters, Inc. is a masterpiece filled to the brim with clever writing. And I hold this movie to the same level as that. Dare I say, I would even compare this movie to Walt Disney's Pinocchio. Now, to some who don't fully appreciate that movie, it may not sound like high praise, but I assure you, if I compare a movie positively to Pinocchio, that is amongst the highest praise I can give a movie. This movie is amazing and special for very similar reasons as Pinocchio is to me. Because this movie covers a lot of deep and emotional themes, and it does so with incredible depth, while also telling a great story in a creative world that remains constantly entertaining with good humor and likable characters. And well, because I felt so strongly about this movie, I had to make a video on it. So, this here is why I believe Inside Out 2 is one of Pixar's greatest masterpieces, and how it left an impact on me personally. One of the first things I love about good sequels is that they expand upon the ideas and world of the first movie. Inside Out 1 had so many amazing and clever ideas for making abstract concepts of the mind into a literal world where characters lived and interacted. And it managed to do so flawlessly, in that everything in this world felt right and connected to the other elements perfectly. And while I always knew there was room for even more ideas to expand upon this world of the mind, this movie blew me away with just how many more ideas it managed to add. In fact, there are so many new ideas that they are often the main things the movie focuses on. And yet, they are also so well integrated into the world that it never feels like we have abandoned anything from the first movie. In fact, I prefer they focus on new ideas, since it shows they have confidence in what they are doing, and not just relying on things we, the audience, already know and like. Just a few clever examples being the Vault of Dark Secrets, a literal vault, of course, run like a prison, so that Riley's dark secrets don't get out and everyone knows what they are, which also gives us some of the best new side characters, more on them in a moment. The Stream of Consciousness, a literal stream, of course, that shows what Riley is thinking about in that moment. Another solid addition that just, makes sense. And there's also the Rumor Mill, or the Sar-Chasm, which lend themselves very well to some clever jokes. There's a brainstorm with light bulb ideas flying around. And the best idea, referred to as a big idea,
that's a big idea,
is just a giant light bulb. I mean, I could go on and on. But most importantly of all, is the belief system, which gives Riley her view of herself and the world, making her who she is. And I love that her beliefs come from her memories and how this ties into the plot. Additionally, when it comes to this idea, I love the way in which Riley's memories and firmly held beliefs about herself create, in a sense, who she truly is. Or at the very least, who she thinks she is. And this is all very important stuff to remember, as it's very easy for us to build an idea of who we really are based on our experiences and what we thought about that, leading us to come to certain conclusions about things and how we start acting in the future. And while a lot of this, to a certain extent, is true about who we actually are, our minds can be very selective about the things that we think about ourselves, because we tend to only think of positive things when it comes to telling ourselves who we actually are. Because why would we want to admit some negative truth about ourselves? And I think it really fits well with Joy's attempts to get rid of all the bad memories so that they can't create any negative beliefs about Riley in her mind. And, of course, all of this may come back to bite her a little bit later on. And it's not just these ideas themselves and their execution, but how well they fit for a sequel. Everything here feels so much bigger in scale and theme, in the same way that Toy Story 2 does to such an immaculate degree. Just everything, every single idea in this movie is so good. Another thing I really like about this movie is how all the main characters from the first movie get to go on the adventure through Riley's mind together. And that when one of them does have to go back up to the main console room, they have it be sadness, since she, along with Joy, already had the most screen time in the first movie. This way, she still gets to do something important, but we see so much more of the characters who got less screen time than before.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
And as for the other three non-main characters of the previous movie, they are all superb. I like how they contrast Joy in a similar but different way to Sadness in the first movie, whereas Sadness baffled Joy because she was the exact opposite of her. These three are often negative sourpusses as well, but in a much more vocal way, and it drives Joy insane, since she is trying to be hopeful while all of them keep dragging her down. I'll touch on this more later, but it adds a lot to the depth of the characters and their dynamic, as well as the themes of the movie. Although I do have to mention one minor negative in this regard. In fact, it is the only negative regarding this whole movie. The replacement of Disgust and Fear's voice actors. Now, it's not a negative because these actors do a bad job. In fact, Disgust's actress is pretty close in quality to the original, but more so, the reason they were replaced is very stupid. Basically, it just boils down to Disney being greedy and not paying their actors enough. Sadly, this does affect Fear a bit since the new actor is not as good as the original. Like I said, not bad by any means, just not as fit for the role as the original was. And you can tell the difference.
Luck isn't gonna help us now. If she tries to use Hockey Island, it's going down.
Which is why I've recalled every hockey memory I can think of. One of these has gotta work in place of the core memory.
If we can't follow the stream, we don't know where we're going. And if we don't know where we're going, we can't follow the stream! It is an endless loop of tragedy and consequence!
Still a solid character. Just wish that Disney wasn't stupid and just kept the original actor. And same for Disgust. Even though she's about the same quality as the original character, they still shouldn't have replaced her either. Now, back to the positives, which will be the whole rest of this review from now on. The animation in this movie is also really good, and while it doesn't have like the much more unique art style of like the Spider-Verse movies or Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, I think it's just really well done. Like, if you look at just small little movements of the characters and facial expressions, a lot of effort has been put into making the characters really shine, and you can see clear examples of the principles of animation being used extremely well, especially with Anxiety, whose animation is just absolutely amazing. Like, just look at a few of these examples where the artist used squash and stretch, or smear frames, or the double imaging on a single frame to show faster movement. Whoever was put in charge of animating this character deserves a promotion. Unless, of course, they're already, like, the highest lead animator position that you can get. Then in that case, they deserve a pay raise. Especially because it's animation, and animators rarely ever get paid enough. Especially when it comes to CGI. The music in this movie is also a very notable point for me. I mean, it's not like it's the greatest soundtrack to any movie ever, but I thought it was really effective, especially two of the main themes. The theme of Riley's sense of self, and Anxiety's music. The sense of self music just has this really lovely melody to it. And I love how it pops up again in several emotional moments later in the movie, like a much sadder version when Joy realizes that she's been doing something wrong, and then it might just be impossible to permanently stop anxiety.
What?
And again during the climax, when Riley's true self appears and all the emotions come together. And of course, Anxiety's theme is perfect for her character because it's just so unpredictable and a little bit off-putting.
Oh my gosh, I am just such a huge fan of yours, and now here I am meeting you face to face. Okay, how can I help? I can take notes, get coffee, manage your calendar, walk your dog, carry your things, watch you sleep.
Wow, you have a lot of energy.
It feels consistently unnerving and occasionally spikes, almost like a mini jump scare, since you never know when anxiety is just gonna hit you like that. Anyway, very good compositions by Andrea Datzman. Oh, and also I could mention that the comedy is very good in this movie, because it is.
And then I tell Anxiety, hey, don't worry so much anymore. And she'll say, wow, Joy, I never thought of that before, thank you.
But, I mean, I always say that. What am I supposed to say? That the comedy is not good in this clearly good movie? The comedy being good is part of why it's good in the first place. You know what? All I'm going to say is that if the Triple Dent Gum song doesn't make an appearance in the inevitable Inside Out 3, we riot.
Triple Dent Gum.
We'll make you smile.
Embarrassment, get that out of here!
So, remember like a minute or two ago when I said I would talk more about the dark secrets? Well, now it's time. Oh boy! First up, Lance. The amazing video game character who Riley had a crush on, but doesn't want anyone to know. I love this guy because of just how astonishingly accurate he is to an actual video game character. I mean, his personality is slightly exaggerated for comedic effect, of course, but that's to be expected from a character whose main purpose is satirical comedy. Immediately, one thing you will notice about him is how he is only rendered at a capped resolution and frame rate to match the resolution of classic games from the 2000s era. He is especially reminiscent of the art style of games like the first two Kingdom Hearts. I wonder why Disney would want to make a video game character in their movie look like a character from Kingdom Hearts. This is a mystery we will never know the answer to, I am sure. I also love how he has a massive sword, like so many anime video game characters do. It's obvious that Cloud Strife was a big inspiration, with his spiky hair, slightly edgy personality, and of course, massive sword. Oh, and speaking of Kingdom Hearts, Cloud Strife actually appeared in that game. Once again, I think it's clear where Disney got their inspiration from. And I love it when he tries to leave the room and gets stuck on the edge of the door and has to reposition himself.
Thank you, friends. I must be leaving you.
This moment had me in stitches. Way too accurate. And lastly, his incredibly lame special move. An obvious rip at some characters in fighting games, especially some moves in Super Smash Bros. That are just so bad, you wonder why anyone would ever use them. Because it's like asking to lose. Which is another perfect reason to make Riley have him as a dark secret, since she wouldn't want people to know she'd rather pick the character who looks good than one who actually plays well. It's clear that whoever was put in charge of writing and animating this character did their research. And it shows the level of care and effort put into this movie from the team behind it. But almost more surprising than that is the other character who appears here, Bloofy. A traditionally animated dog character from a children's TV series. You know, the ones like Dora the Explorer, Blue's Clues, and Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, where they always break the fourth wall and ask the audience if they can solve some problem, usually waiting an excruciatingly long time for the answer.
So, which path leads to the glass bridge? The path on the right or the path on the left? The path on the left. Boy, we really are smart.
Bluefy is a laugh-out-loud satire on those lame kid shows. Not gonna lie, I do have a small soft spot for Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, but the other ones of that kind are pretty lame. The way in which he breaks the fourth wall to ask us in the audience the questions, only for it to be revealed that he is just talking to the wall, is amazing.
Uh-oh, we're gonna need your help. Can you find a way out?
Who are you talking to?
My friends, do you see a key? I don't either.
I also just love how over-the-top and condescending he is, annoying the main emotions. I love how the response to him is pretty much how every child feels while watching these shows, usually saying nothing when he asks for engagement, or telling him something obvious that he isn't doing. Well, that's how I feel anyway. I also love that he has his own Toodles/backpack-inspired, magically talking item named Pouchy, who can just produce anything the characters need out of thin air.
Everybody say, "Oh, Toodles!"
Oh, Toodles!
Everybody say, "Oh, Pouchy!"
And how Anger just can't stand how stupidly obvious the choice is. Oh, and on the topic of Pouchy here, I love how, unlike other movies, this movie remembers that when the characters are in a situation, they have the ability to call on Pouchy to help them out of this situation. Usually in a situation like this, a character like Pouchy would just be assumed by most people to be a joke character who has no further use after his first appearance. But whoever wrote this scene realized that, instead of trying to come up with some contrived way to get the characters out of this situation, it would make more sense to have something the movie has already established return, thus making their escape from their situation more satisfying, because it builds off the elements already introduced, including the stream of consciousness as well.
Before adding something new to your magic, and I will put your setting in general. See if you can instead expand what you have. Your ability to solve problems with magic in satisfying ways directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic.
And I like that this movie does that here with Pouchy. It just helps the movie to feel more complete and airtight. Technically, there's also a third dark secret I should also mention. A big dark figure who says nothing, but is a big help in escaping the vault. Later in the end credits, it is revealed that Riley's big bad dark secret, the one that this character is keeping hidden, is just that he burnt a hole in a rug. Which is definitely a twist. Even Joy is baffled that it isn't something worse. All of them are great additions to the movie, and I love how much variety they add to this world, and how well executed all of them are in the ideas that they are based off of. Of course, those characters are not the only ones introduced. In fact, they're probably the least important new characters. The major characters that this movie introduces are the new emotions. Envy, an emotion that always wants to be better and is jealous and, well, envious of others who are seemingly better in several ways. I love that she is tiny, representing how, when you are envious, you feel so much smaller and less important than someone else who you think is better. Envy's eyes being so large is also a nice touch, since it makes her look like she's always eyeing everything that she wants. Completely obsessed with it, always staring at it. And I love that little, anime-looking effect they sometimes put on her eyes when she's really into something that she wants. Embarrassment is also here, an emotion who is just adorable. Just like how when people in real life are embarrassed, they feel so exposed and unsure what to say, often coming off in a weirdly adorable way, which just makes them more embarrassed usually. And his design is also amazing. I love how he barely says anything, mirroring how people in real life never know what to say when they are embarrassed, worried that if they do say something, it will just make the situation worse and embarrass them further. The hoodie outfit that he constantly tightens to hide his face and embarrassment is also a nice touch, giving us a great visual to know what he is thinking even when he isn't saying anything. His size is another great element, embarrassment, since an embarrassed person often feels like their errors or insecurities are on full display to the whole world, and that they are super exposed and obvious, like a giant standing out from the crowd. Say it with me, folks. The power of show, don't tell on full display here. The fact that he is the color pink also fits perfectly, since it matches the shading on a person's cheeks when they are flustered or blushing, often from embarrassment. And lastly, the small touch when he tries to fall down and hide himself, we see a tiny sliver of his bum crack. The kind of thing a person in real life would be super embarrassed about if someone pointed it out to them. Just perfect. And then there's ennui, or boredom. A character who doesn't do too much, but in an ironic twist, only makes their role even more fitting, since a bored person rarely feels the energy or enthusiasm to do anything at all. The fact that she's always on her phone and would rather activate the console with an app than actually do anything is super hilarious. And I love the fact that Sadness stealing the phone from her later on causes her more panic about not having the phone to distract her than the way Sadness could use it to undo Anxiety's plans.
Ennui, where's your phone?
Oh la la, my phone? Where is my phone? Seriously? This is not happening.
Oh, and speaking of a certain someone, that brings me to Anxiety, the most important new character of this film and its primary antagonist. I absolutely adore Anxiety as a villain. Not only because she is obviously relatable, but because she genuinely thinks she is doing the right thing and helping Riley. Oh, and I just have to mention this little detail here that I absolutely love. That Anxiety brings with her a bunch of luggage when she moves in, meant to represent the idea that emotions like anxiety can sometimes bring with them a lot of emotional baggage. Just a nice little touch by the animators. I like that she has an intentionally more dorky and quirky design, since it fits with the fact that she is always insecure about what other people will think of her, and how that will affect her going forward.
See? Was that so hard?
No, you're totally right. That decision's not gonna haunt us for the rest of our lives at all.
She is the part of Riley that worries the most about who she is, and a part of that is what she looks like. Deep down, some people seem to have this idea that they are ugly, in a super dorky way like Anxiety. But really, there is nothing wrong with them, and they've just been set up with too high of expectations of themselves. And another detail about Anxiety that I love, as I briefly brought up before, is the movements that she's animated with, and how they just make her so on edge all the time, zipping around here and there and everywhere, trying to fully grasp everything that's happening in the situation. And even when she seems like she's calm, she could just suddenly snap at any moment and jolt into a completely different position. In a sense, Anxiety is a twist villain, but not in the sense that she is a twist villain to us, the audience, but a twist villain to herself. Since, like I said, she only acts in the ways she genuinely thinks will be best for Riley.
That is not Riley.
I know. It's a better Riley.
A Riley who won't be alone next year.
We build her a new sense of self. A brand new her.
Just look at her first scene. She's trying to stop Riley from embarrassing herself and ruining a perfect first impression with the girl that she looks up to. And though she is trying her best to prepare for the worst outcome, she occasionally goes too far. She's very controlling and wants to stop others from interfering. She lives in constant fear of what might happen, and in a different way from Fear, who is more afraid of what is currently happening. Anxiety is afraid of the things that might never even happen, and this makes her worried. She hates that nobody else except her seems to care. Her outlook on the world is so negative because she thinks that she's the only one actually trying to do the best thing.
I am truly sorry. I was so looking forward to working with you guys.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
Get off me. Riley's life is more complex now. It requires more sophisticated emotions than all of you.
She is so blinded by her attempts to create the best case scenario that she ends up shutting everyone out, both the emotions on the inside and the real people on the outside. All of these elements combine to make her one of the best characters in any Pixar movie. I love how the new emotions in this movie represent the idea of a person becoming more complex as they get older. People think not just in basic ways, but mixed ways. It's a perfect expansion of the mixed emotion memories of the first movie's ending. The downside, of course, is that we as people often start to overthink things as we get older. Take, for example, the scene near the beginning of the movie where Riley is talking with her friends in the car and suddenly goes into an extreme focus on a minor detail. This scene is great for multiple reasons. Firstly, it is a great way to show us how well Riley knows her friends, that she can tell that they are thinking of something they aren't saying just by studying their expressions.
Enhance 224, 176. Track right, zoom in. Right there!
So?
She's hiding something. But what?
Secondly, and less positively, it shows us how obsessive Riley is becoming, in that she is already starting to worry too much. She thinks that if her friends are keeping something from her, then she will be left out and potentially left behind.
I love humans. All of us seeing patterns in things that aren't there.
And not making things any better is that her theories, in a sense, are right, since her friends are going to leave her soon. It really taps into that relatable worry that when everyone you know starts to leave, you will have no one, because at that time, there is no one who will be there to listen to you and spend time with you. Well, other than your parents. But everyone knows that just isn't the same thing. I think it's also very important the fact that Riley is right about her assumptions here in this scene, because it reinforces anxiety's perspective. She continues to think throughout the rest of the movie that she has to continuously be afraid of these things happening because, in the past, her worries have come true. And that's one of the ultimate traps that so many people in real life fall into. It's like if you're a gambler and you keep trying over and over again to win at a casino, just because you know that once in a while someone does actually win. And you don't want to stop trying to win because you've already put so much into trying to win up to this point. The same thing applies to anxiety. You know that every once in a while, at the very least, you will be right. And so you just can't stop constantly trying to think of the worst case scenarios. That way, if something does inevitably go wrong, you'll know that you were right. And in some weird, twisted kind of way, I guess that makes people feel better about themselves. That they knew it was coming. But it doesn't really do much to actually make their situation any better. And if anything, they've probably made it worse along the way. Things only get worse for Riley in the very next scene when she runs into Val for the first time. She is immediately faced with a situation she has never had to deal with before. Judgment. Or rather, the fear of judgment. Considering that Val is Riley's hero, she wants to make a good impression on her, since being disliked by your hero would be the worst feeling ever. Just ask Syndrome. And so Riley becomes truly anxious for the first time. And here we see how anxiety tries to constantly stop Riley from saying stupid stuff, usually caused by the other emotions just letting her be herself or express her opinions. You know, terrible stuff like that. This is the big problem with looking up to someone. It makes you value their opinions and thoughts to such a high degree that those very thoughts start to become your own, even if they are not really what you truly believe. The fear of looking bad or not fitting in with those you want to accept you can be a dangerous and damaging mindset, since thinking this way, you are likely to act differently or say things just to receive acceptance by a group. And regardless of what you actually think, saying these things just to fit in and acting a certain way will eventually change who you are and how you act. Often this is for the worse, because it makes you into a fake version of yourself. Your thoughts are no longer based on a foundation you built, but the word of others. And when you only believe a thing because it is what you are told, then is it really something you believe? Because Riley is afraid of not fitting in, she rejects the things she actually likes deep down. And sadly, because her friends refuse to change like her to fit in, she begins rejecting them. In her mind, the thought of being cool and fitting in is more appealing. But she doesn't realize yet how important a genuine friendship or relationship is. Because being in a group that only accepts you because you think what they think and say what they say will never allow you to create a deep bond, because both people must connect on a genuine level for that to work. And the fake nature of fitting in makes you less special and thus less genuine. Sometimes acceptance and fitting in aren't worth it if it is actively making you a worse person in order to do so. Oh, and if you don't mind me begging, If even a couple of you guys could press the like and subscribe buttons as ferociously as anxiety pushes the buttons on this console here, I would be eternally grateful. Anxiety at this point has become too afraid of failure that she considers Riley's old emotions, and thus a representation of her old self, to be a threat to her future. And so she literally bottles up those emotions to get rid of them. A clever, if somewhat unsubtle metaphor. And because her emotions are suppressed, Riley herself seems more cold and emotionless. And whenever she does emote, it is always something negative or fake. Riley's mindset of trying to fit in and make sure she becomes notable and is remembered is primarily driven by the way anxiety has taken over her mind. She has essentially caused Riley to assume the worst and never think in basic emotions. Her happiness is fake because her true joy has been suppressed in order to simply fit in, to pretend to like things she doesn't actually care about. This leads to boredom or envy, since she wishes she enjoyed these other things more than she actually does. All of this meaning she is not truly happy. But in a tragic twist of fate, all anxiety seems to want is future Riley's happiness, since that is all she is ever obsessing over. One of this movie's best and most clever scenes is when the main emotions find out that anxiety has hijacked Riley's imagination and is using it against her. There are multiple layers to what makes this so great. First of all, it is a logical thing for anxiety to do, since she genuinely believes that attempting to plot out every negative possibility for Riley's future will help her and stop her from making mistakes. And secondly, it is genius that she uses the area of her imagination to do this. When we are young, all we usually think about are fun things in our imagination. They say the most creative geniuses on the planet are children because they don't try to think with logic or reasoning the same way we do. They just let their minds flow like a river, and their imaginations spark ideas that most adults are too close-minded to think of.
Truly wonderful the mind of a child is.
But sadly, when we get older, we tend to use our imaginations more and more to think up thoughts relating to our lives in the moment, and even more so in the future. And since most people, especially these days, tend to lean more pessimistic than positive, that means thinking about all the horrible things that could go wrong in the future. The big problem with this mindset is that it makes people view the entire world around them more negatively. By always assuming the worst, it makes people into black holes of enthusiasm and joy. And worse, by always thinking like this, you start to feel like things are always going wrong. You focus on every small thing that goes wrong in your life, and you forget to count your blessings along the way.
Anxiety has got you all chained to desks, drawing nightmares, but you don't have to take it anymore.
Only through the acceptance that the future cannot be predicted can a person find relaxation and lift an unnecessary weight off their shoulders. It is hard, though, because we are so afraid that if we do not think about the future and consider all possibilities, that we will be vulnerable, and in that moment, we stop trying to prepare for the future. That is when something will go wrong. But the constant need to be prepared makes us act differently than we normally would. It makes us into perfectionists, and anyone who has seen my Azula video would know that being a perfectionist can have dire side effects. Attempting to stop yourself from ever making a mistake, and succeeding as soon as possible, and the worry that you will never get given another chance by the world, it can make you into a worse person. The way Riley's new logic has changed her has made her think less about others and more about herself, because in her perfectionist view, she is always the priority. She is losing her friends and is genuinely missing a limited opportunity because of her irrational fear driven by her obsession with the future. Around this part where Riley is trying to fit in with the others and accidentally makes the horrible mistake of mentioning her favorite band, when the Sar-Chasm first appears in Riley's mind, I love the detail that it tears apart its surroundings to create this giant gap there. And it's perfectly timed with how Riley first uses this Sar-Chasm, because she's not using it in just a joking way, but to hide what she truly thinks. And so in a sense, she's burying her true self and creating a tear in the very fabric of who she is on the inside, which is also, another lovely detail. Oh, and you know what else is lovely? The bit where anxiety goes to bring some more of her anxious memories down to Riley's belief system, and it notices the broccoli that the main characters were using to ride down the stream of consciousness. Now, this may not seem like anything notable, but it's actually a great way to foreshadow the fact that the Sar-Chasm leads directly to Riley's core memory belief system area. You know what I'm trying to say. Since, the broccoli fell into the chasm. And later on, the characters themselves will fall into the chasm with all the bad memories, and it will lead them here. And so, because we already saw the broccoli going here, it's not out of nowhere that the characters end up there because they fell into the chasm here. You know what I'm trying to say? Anyway, I thought it was a nice touch. It's also very worth noting, in my opinion, how Riley always seems to appear happy with her supposedly new friends, but it's a detail that I actually find to be extra sad, because people rarely ever appear as broken as they actually are on the inside, on the outside. Always trying to appear happy because they don't want to make someone else sad, but in the process they end up going through all these struggles without the help they actually need, because people think that they're more okay than they actually are. And it's especially sad for Riley here, because she thinks she needs to appear happy to be accepted by this group, when she's not really as happy as she actually appears to be. And another small but very important detail that's easy to miss, that I think has a lot of meaning, is this really brief scene right here.
You'll do great. Just be yourself. Did you hear that? We could become a firehawk, like, tomorrow.
Because what Val is doing right here is giving Riley some actual genuine advice here, but Riley just completely misses it. She is so focused on the idea of doing well and becoming a part of this team in the future that she essentially just ends up ignoring this advice. And it shows just how easily we can be caught up in our own minds, that we can miss obvious stuff right in front of our faces, especially when people are trying to help us. And it goes completely over our heads because we have already decided what we're going to do, even if it's not the right thing to do. Also, if you think about it, Valentina and her friends are actually pretty nice to Riley, as they are always talking to her in these scenes. Like, trust me, if people are actually talking to you at all, they probably like you, or really hate you and have a bone to pick, but obviously this is not a case like that. But in her constant obsession, Riley completely misses this as well. She is so focused on not messing up that she doesn't realize just how lucky she is that these girls are actually giving her the time of day at all and not just completely dismissing her. The slow progression of anxiety's takeover of Riley's mind is one of the most rewarding yet sad things to watch in this movie. The more time that passes, the more we see how anxiety is making more and more memories based on her emotion, completely overwhelming the other emotions, even the ones on her side. And she has essentially just made herself the boss of Riley's mind. All of this being another clever metaphor for how letting your anxieties get out of control and obsessing over things all the time will lead to anxiety completely taking over your life and driving every decision you make. And this is not a good thing. Decisions made out of fear and worry are almost never the wisest ones. And just like how Riley's anxieties have started to make her stray from who she truly is as a person, it is also making her into a worse person wholesale. There comes a point where she is even willing to break the rules and sneakily examine confidential notes just because she cannot stand the thought of not knowing. And it is only in realizing that she has done something similar in the past that she regrets, and that she almost stops her plans. This also only happens because, sadness manages to get a hold of the controls temporarily. But it is too late. And with this new information, anxiety once again kicks in and tries to double down. The fear of allowing the teacher to say she is a failure in front of everyone and embarrass her is too much for her to simply just accept that she isn't ready. Once again showing why I love anxiety as a villain so much. Because what she's doing here, she believes will be for Riley's better good in the future. That if she sees these notes, if she takes them into account, if she constantly obsesses over them, that will make her perform better so that she can avoid the worst outcome and thus have a better future. And the way in which she tries to explain all these things to sadness is in and of itself sad. Because there's just too many moments in real life where I've seen the same thing happen to so many people. They believe they have to do things in order to have a better future.
I know Riley sneaking around feels wrong.
This isn't who Riley is.
It's not about who Riley is. It's about who she needs to be.
And they ignore the warnings because they just can't see how it's hurting them. And they're actively destroying their lives while trying so desperately to hold themselves together and have the best possible life. And on top of everything else, anxiety's control also affects her physically. Riley, that is, as she pushes herself too hard trying to prove herself, even though she isn't ready yet. Anxiety using Riley's anxious emotions to create a new sense of self is the ultimate culmination of all this, as it shows how anxiety actively changes who you are fundamentally. She is turning Riley into a different person, someone whose only existence is an existence controlled by anxiety. One of the worst parts is that this behavior is subconsciously forced on her by society. People with more experience or difference of opinion often say and do things that make other people who are different from them or less skilled seem like lesser people. Usually, this is an insecurity on their part because they want to appear better than they actually are. And people like Riley are intimidated by them because they believe that if they don't live up to what these people want them to be, then they will be a failure and a reject.
Wait, why did you do that?
Sorry, what did I do?
We just left our best friends behind.
But what about the new ones that we're about to meet?
No, okay. These next 3 days need to be about Bree and Grace.
Joy, the next 3 days could determine the next 4 years of our lives.
Riley doesn't need to change herself or push herself so hard to be like these people, but sadly she feels that she needs to fit in or else she will forever be unhappy and lonely for the rest of her life. The idea that people need to make the right decisions when they are young or be doomed forever is a shockingly prevalent one. Even if people don't mean to send this message, it gets in people's heads because we are always told about young prodigies, people who become immensely successful with great careers all while they are still relatively young. And when people hear these stories, they start comparing themselves to these people. But the problem is, no two people are alike, and more importantly, everyone comes from a wildly different background. How can anyone truly compare themselves to someone else who was richer or related to a famous person or born in a completely different part of the world with a completely different culture? It's a logical fallacy to compare two lives like this. I mean that literally, like, it's called false equivalency. But sadly, people do it all the time, and it makes them feel terrible about themselves when they don't end up succeeding as much as the people they keep inaccurately comparing themselves to. All of this has caused internal conflict inside of Riley. This same internal conflict is perfectly visualized by anxiety. The way she got rid of the other emotions and their struggle to get back and stop her, it's all a perfect way to show how the way a person sees themselves and the world, and how the world sees them in return, are often at odds with each other. This constant striving for perfectionism and to always do the best thing all the time is what caused anxiety to appear in the first place. I think it's very intentional that anxiety doesn't show up until the exact moment Riley is put on the spot to show how good she is, immediately comparing herself to Val. Envy and embarrassment also join in, since they naturally come with anxiety. Because Riley now sees herself as being unworthy of who she really is, she thinks that people will reject her if she isn't perfect. But the truth is, no one can be perfect. And if you never accept your mistakes and learn from them, it will only lead you down a path of self-destruction. The main climax of this movie might just be one of the most emotional climaxes of any Pixar movie. Anxiety has reached her limit. Even after everything she did, Riley still messes up, making her feel like it was all for nothing. But still, her last hope, that Riley's new sense of self will allow her to focus and achieve her goal, is still there. But unfortunately for her, in that moment, anxiety is confounded to discover that what she hoped to create in Riley is not what she got.
Yes, come on! Here we go!
I'm not good enough.
What?
I'm not good enough.
She thought she was going to make Riley stronger by pushing her to be better and avoid all mistakes. But because the personality she was built on was entirely based on fears and worries, and all those best aspects she hoped for are things that Riley has not achieved and was struggling to do so. And so, what she actually got was a belief that Riley will never be good enough. This is a heartbreaking moment because it's so true. People try so hard to be the best they can be, but because they focus more on their failures than their successes, they end up thinking too lowly about themselves. This toxic mindset is what causes many people to ultimately give up on life, because they genuinely think they failed and will never be able to succeed where they want to. It's doubly heartbreaking because of how much Anxiety believed in this, that she was doing the right thing and helping Riley. And so many people in real life end up with this same mindset. They let anxiety ruin their lives while believing the whole time they were making the right decisions. Anxiety just can't accept that this is the truth and that she was the one who made it happen. Oh, can I give a shout out to my boy Embarrassment over here and his excellent redemption arc in this movie? Like, I love that he starts out on Anxiety's side because he thinks that what Anxiety plans to do will ultimately be for Riley's better future, since it'll help her avoid more embarrassment. But later on, we see him reviewing some of the memories that Riley is creating, and he comes to realize that these memories Anxiety is creating are actually only going to cause Riley more embarrassment, because these constant negative traits are only going to backfire on her in the future, and they're really just making her into a more insecure version of herself. And so in a sense, he becomes embarrassed of himself and what he's doing, helping Anxiety here to achieve her plans. He realizes that he is one of the bad guys, and ultimately tries his best to not get thrown out of the room, but still be able to make a difference by helping Sadness. And it's great to watch, but he's just too afraid to completely go against Anxiety, because then she'll just turn on him, and he'll get shamed even more by her. And so you just kind of gotta feel bad for the guy. He wants to do the right thing, but he's always in such a terrible situation. But you know what? Let's give him some encouragement. Everybody look at Embarrassment and say, "You're a great guy, Embarrassment." You know that? Near the end of the movie, as the main emotions reach their final destination, to take back Riley's original sense of self and restore it to her, this has also led the emotions to a massive pile of bad memories that Joy tried to get rid of. And it is here that Joy realizes something. In a similar way to how she realized the importance of Sadness in the first movie, Joy looks at these bad memories, the things she wanted to forget, because she was afraid they would make Riley seem like a bad person, which goes against her idea of making Riley the best person ever and seeing herself as good. The problem is that it simply isn't true. Everyone makes mistakes, and trying to pretend you don't make mistakes doesn't make you a better person. It only makes you a liar to yourself and to everyone else. Accepting one's mistakes is not only the humble and true option, but it's the only way to help you learn and prevent yourself from making those mistakes next time.
They say those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
One thing that makes Joy's realization that she's in the wrong so powerful is that the thing she didn't understand from before in the plot was that she was being a hypocrite, and she couldn't see it until her own enemy, Anxiety, admitted her fault.
But you're right. We don't get to choose who Riley is.
That she was trying to control Riley, something which Joy herself called out, but didn't realize at that moment that she too was also guilty of doing. And I think it's a perfect way to show that it doesn't matter if you're overly positive or overly negative about yourself. Neither viewpoint is actually helping anything. The only viewpoint that can help you is true humility, the perspective of seeing oneself for who they truly are in an honest way, admitting both flaws and aspects about one's character, and trying to get rid of all the negatives or all the positives in yourself. It's just creating an illusion. And on the same topic, one major but subtle detail I love about Joy's machine to get rid of these bad memories is that it is completely artificial. It's not a natural part of this world. Joy is literally tampering with the way things are meant to be, and she is only now realizing that in order for Riley to be mentally healthy, she has to remember these bad memories. trying to push them away to the furthest back reaches of her mind, has caused her to actually have too high of an opinion of herself. The problem isn't that Riley is inherently selfish or trying to be perfect by nature, but that by forgetting her mistakes, she is making herself believe that she can only do good and amazing things. And if she thinks this, then she pushes herself too hard to be something that she isn't. And when she inevitably falls short of that, she can't believe it. Joy's attempts to turn Riley into the perfect version of herself also fails just to simply be true to who she actually is. Since it doesn't really matter what Joy does to try and make Riley think of herself better. What a person thinks of themselves is ultimately going to be less important than how other people perceive their actions. What you choose to do and how you affect other people shows the true character of a person, much more so than what they say about themselves. And it's why it's so hard to trust someone when they claim a bunch of positive stuff about themselves. Since if they don't back that up with their actions, how do we know they're not just lying or overcompensating? It's very easy for people to say positive stuff about themselves, especially when they're afraid of being perceived as negative, and the constant positivity talk over themselves is actually a way for them to try and cover up all their negative aspects by overloading everyone with so many positives that if they ever do mess up or do something negative, they could just claim that it's an exception to all the positive traits they have. But every time you claim that you are more positive than negative, and you don't back up those positive traits as often as you make mistakes, it's only going to ultimately do more harm to your reputation, especially when it kind of just makes you look selfish, which is ultimately what Riley comes to realize as part of who she is when she comes to realize what her true sense of self should be. The scene where Riley starts hyperventilating is chilling to watch, and it's one of the saddest scenes I've ever seen in any movie. Watching a person panic over their life and future because of reasons that they have brought upon themselves out of fear is just tragic. Joy's calming down of anxiety is a perfectly poetic moment, though, in that Riley only begins to calm down and get control when she remembers her old self and who she used to be, as well as the importance of her friends who do still care despite everything she did. I also adore that bringing back Riley's old sense of self is not what solves the issue, since her old view of life was that she was a good person. But that view is just as damaging as her new one, because one of these beliefs is that she is worthless, while the other belief is that she is perfect. But neither view is true. The reality is that she is both a good person and a flawed person who often falls short of what she wants to achieve. I love that both Joy and anxiety come to realize that they have to accept each other, because who Riley is not one of them or the other, but all of them. Every aspect of her personality and emotions. All the good memories and the bad memories. And just because Riley has made mistakes, that doesn't make her a bad person, just like anyone in real life. And even with our flaws, we are all still beautifully created beings, worthy of love, no matter who we are, what we think, or what we've done in the past. I found these moments of the film, and indeed its entire message, extremely powerful and meaningful. You see, I may not suffer from any form of anxiety that affects my life to the degree of Riley here, but sometimes I feel like if I didn't have such a supportive family or as good of an idea of how my own mind works, I probably would. My current career is YouTube, and this may come as a surprise to you guys, but I didn't become a YouTuber because I specifically wanted to do it for my job. I chose to become a YouTuber because I thought I would be good at it, and I mean, I do have a lot of opinions to share, and also, I'm genuinely afraid of getting a quote-unquote normal job. I don't do good in situations where I don't feel in control, and all entry-level jobs would stress me out. What I actually wanted to do with my life was to become a film director, to tell grand stories to people, the kinds of stories no one else was telling, the kind only I could tell. I went to college and got a basic degree in filmmaking, but because I was born into a poor family, I don't have the money to travel to LA or to pay for the outrageous living expenses there. all on the chance just to get rejected by Hollywood. All my money I've spent on forwarding my career on YouTube, buying a computer, a good microphone, movies and shows on Blu-ray so that I can access them anytime and watch special features. All of this on the slim chance that if I can succeed enough on YouTube, I might one day be able to do the job I dreamed of doing since I was a kid. This is where I start relating to the movie. The way YouTube is designed is as an extremely competitive environment, and I am doing this all by myself at the moment. And if I don't succeed, I not only risk not getting paid and losing my only source of income, but I risk not becoming popular enough to achieve my dreams in the future. I feel just like Riley here, trying to make it big when I'm young, so that I don't have to risk losing out on all my dreams forever. And due to the ever-changing nature of YouTube and the infamous algorithm, it feels like control is out of my hands, and that's probably because it is, most of the time. Every single video I edit is incredibly difficult to make. My ADHD symptoms cause me to get easily distracted and quickly bored when editing. But when I'm not editing, I feel extremely guilty and pressured to always be doing something. Because if I'm not editing, then I'm not able to release a video, and thus I'm not succeeding fast enough to be able to one day achieve my dreams before I am an old man, or worse, never. I wish that I could do something to make these things go my way, but forcing it only makes things worse. I mean, could you imagine if I just started pumping out low-quality videos that were just complete clickbait just to get a bunch of views to succeed? Yeah, over my dead body. You can always expect quality from Rakotar. Something this movie has helped me to realize and reinforce is that there will always be things you can't control, like how rich the family you're born into is. Ha ha ha. But that doesn't mean you should try to control things anyways. Sometimes you have to accept that you can only control so much, and those things that you can control are what you should focus on and not worry about the distant future. After all is said and done, anxiety still has a place amongst the emotions. It isn't wrong to be anxious, so long as you don't let your anxious thoughts get out of hand. Preparing for the future and the worst possible outcomes can actually be helpful mentally, because it can allow you to take adequate, not extreme, mind you, actions to possibly prevent it from happening. Or, if there is nothing you can do, it can help you to prepare yourself mentally for the blow you are about to take and move on from it more easily. I love how anxiety has to take a back seat, another nice little metaphor. Still there with her anxious thoughts, but trying to calm herself and focus on the now. Nobody can control the future, and so constantly obsessing over it won't do anyone any good, especially if it distracts you from more important things that are happening right now. Focusing on doing what can be achieved now will always benefit you more than trying to outsmart life itself. And there's another important scene I wanted to bring up, but I wanted to save it till now. It's a scene that I believe has incredible ramifications and impact on the main theme of the movie. Well, technically, it's actually like two scenes. The part where they're like walking through Riley's mind and everyone is bothering Joy, and the scene when they have arrived at the mountain of bad memories. But they're both part of the same theme, essentially, so you know what I'm trying to say. During the main emotions journey to find Riley's original sense of self, she has an argument with the other emotions about how to solve their problem, and the others get mad at her for being so positive in spite of the increasing struggle. Joy then bursts out at them, saying that she is trying so hard to hold them all together, because without positivity and hope, then none of them will get anywhere. But really, Joy's frustration comes more from the realization of one of life's hardest truths, that in a world that is constantly out to put you down, it is so hard to stay positive. Even when you want desperately, more than anything else, just to be happy. Sometimes it feels impossible to truly be happy. Growing up means understanding more about the world, and with understanding comes realizing that there is so much more to life than you ever imagined. And that can be overwhelming, especially when society often pressures people to be perfect all the time. And it can feel incredibly demotivating to keep going and be strong like you know you can, when there will just be another mountain past the hill you just spent so long climbing. I also like that at this part, Joy realizes a hard truth to accept, that anxiety is something you can't just get rid of. It'll always be there for the rest of your life, and you have to accept that fact. Because if you don't, it'll just drive you to insanity like Joy here. It's not something you can overcome. It's just something that you have to deal with in your own way as you go through life.
I don't know how to stop anxiety. Maybe we can't. Maybe this is what happens when you grow up. You feel less joy.
But something important to remember is, just because you aren't happy now, doesn't mean you will never be happy again. Going through these tough times may feel impossible, but every now and again, even if it isn't as often as when you were younger, you will find happiness and satisfaction again, and that is what makes it worth going on anyway.
Joy, you've made a lot of mistakes. A lot. And you'll make a whole lot more in the future. But if you let that stop you, we might as well lie down and give up now. Come on. We're right behind you.
One small detail that I sort of noticed, I'm hesitant to say that it was intentional because this could have just been a design choice for the sequel here, but Joy has this glow effect around her, you know? However, I noticed that in the first movie, this glow effect is much brighter and stronger than it appears in the second movie. Like I said, it could just be an intentional choice, visually speaking, for the animation or whatever, but if that wasn't the only reason, then it's also possible that they intentionally made her light glow less brightly because of the fact that Riley feels less joy now. Listen, if this was intentional, then I must say that is a very, very lovely touch there. And subtle, too. It's exactly the kind of touches we need a lot more of in modern Hollywood. And lastly, the final shot of this movie is also really great in my opinion. In a similar way to Soul, another one of Pixar's movies with a great final shot, the movie ends on a mostly ambiguous note. Before that, we see how Riley is improving by accepting her mistakes, even if she ultimately ends up thinking lesser of herself because of them. She keeps going and tries to strive for something great. And in the final shot, we see her open her phone and smile, but it is never shown exactly what it is that made her smile. Her friends? Her hopes for a future career? Whatever it may be, the genius of it is that it doesn't matter. Just like how anxiety obsessed over the future and realized that she had to accept she has no control over that. This movie doesn't show us what happens next, because the future is unpredictable, and the main thing that matters is living in the moment and doing the best you can with what you are given. And one day, that may lead you to a great future, so long as you keep going, even when times are tough. A massive thank you to all my iconic patrons out there, and an especially big thank you to E.J. Waywalker, my ultra-iconic patron. If you want to follow me, I'm on all sorts of social medias, which you can find the links in the description down below, as well as a gaming channel, which I would hope you'd be interested in. I put effort into those videos. Oh, and also don't forget to tell me what your thoughts on Inside Out 2 are. And if I can stop you before you go, why don't you check out another one of my Pixar videos in this here playlist? Or if you're in the mood for a different, impeccably perfect movie that isn't Pixar, but is still in the Disney zone, then of course you could also check out this Wreck-It Ralph video I made a while ago. It seems to be pretty popular, so if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you'd love it. But most importantly of all, always remember to be iconic.